It seems like we finally have some dates for the return of live fans to pro wrestling shows. AEW announces a big milestone in its TV deal, and we got a couple injuries to report. This is the Rantin Review Podcast. What is on, you sexy bitches? Welcome back to the Rantin Review Podcast. It's been a while, but we're going to check it out again today, the world of entertainment, and we're going to get to it today. But before we get to that, I want to remind you guys that I do have a Patreon page, and that Patreon does have some exclusive stuff for you guys. We do Q&As. We do some watch-alongs to old school wrestling shows. I will be debuting I'm still working on the script for the new New Japan Explain series that we are redoing because it's been about 3 or 4 years since I did that one, so it needs to be updated. If you want to get previews of that and some exclusive content, everything else, all you have to do is go to patreon.com/wrestlinrantin, RASSSLINRANTIN, for all of your wonderful wrestling updates. Now you can, join for as little as $1. $1 gets you a shout out, $3 gets you the Q&A and the shout out, and of course then there's the ultimate tier for a whopping $5. You get pretty much everything that gets up on that Patreon page. So check it out now, patreon.com/wrestlinrantin, RASSSLINRANTIN. So there's a lot of news that has come out this week, and particularly in the wrestling world, some pretty crazy stuff. So right off the bat, as far as WWE is concerned, we got a major injury, The Miz, after that. What I still have not watched, because I did not watch the Backlash. I told you guys I only really watched the major WWE pay-per-views and an occasional Raw or Smackdown. But apparently during that, there was a zombie match. Apparently, I'm still not quite clear why there were zombies. Some people try to explain it to me, and I'm just like, I want to watch it just to see what the hell it was. But apparently it was some promotion tied into Batista's new movie that I am going to watch and review on the YouTube channel. But that aside, the major thing that came out of it actually was The Miz getting injured. So the reports are right now that it may be an ACL tear. And as somebody who's had an ACL tear, I can tell you that is a pain in the butt to deal with. He may or may not have to have surgery. We'll find out about that. If it's a complete tear, the likelihood is that he's going to be out for at least half a year at the minimum. Now, he's in pretty good shape. So the better shape you're in, the more likely you are to recover from it. And, he's not going to want to sit on the shelf. Now, The Miz has never been injured. I didn't even know this. When I looked up the story, he's never actually had a major injury in his entire time he's been in the ring. But that isn't all that surprising either, because The Miz has always wrestled. I think even Daniel Bryan said he wrestles safe or whatever, cowardly or whatever. But Miz is a character wrestler. He doesn't have to do a lot of stuff in the ring. That's not his shtick. His shtick is to be a big, obnoxious person that you want to see get punched in the mouth. He doesn't actually have to have really good matches to be effective at what he does. So best of luck to The Miz. Hopefully he recovers pretty soon and he can come back from that tear, because I will say a couple years ago, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, he was probably, him and Cody at that time, I think it was 2017, I thought were the best heels of 2017 in all of wrestling. The Miz was really, really good that year. He's kind of slipped down a little bit, but then again, like I said, I don't watch WWE on a weekly basis, so I don't really know how well or how bad he's doing. But I haven't heard a lot about him as much as he was a topic of a conversation a couple years ago. So, again, best wishes to The Miz, and hopefully he can recover soon. WWE also announces that, there's a couple of announcements here. One of them is that they are suspecting to have fans back in June for the Money in the Bank pay-per-view, which is one of the big pay-per-views that I do watch. Now, there's some conflicting reports about that, because another report I saw said that it'll be the Smackdown go-home show before Money in the Bank that they're going to have live crowds in attendance. And I think this is going to be somewhat similar to what New Japan, ironically enough, was doing a year ago, where they're going to have some social distancing. But having fans back for North American shows is going to be pretty good. And how ironic is that, like a year after New Japan went back to having crowds and we didn't. Now it's kind of flipped. Now New Japan is shut down, and the Western companies are all having are about to get back to having crowds. They're not the only ones, of course, but I think this will be really good because here's one thing I've noticed about WWE: the slight enjoyment I do get out of watching them. A lot of it has to do with the fans and how the fans react to what WWE tries to present to them. That's part of the fun of watching WWE. And without the fans and without genuine fan reactions and genuine fan chants, it just isn't the same. So I think maybe the show will be slightly better once we get to hear fans react to the stuff that WWE's putting on. Although I will say that since the pandemic started, the star power in WWE is not what it was. And that could be an issue because there was a lot of celebration about this week's Raw ratings. And I was like, oh, Raw's ratings were up. And I was expecting to see like 2.5 or something like that. They got a 1.8. Which again, they're not, their competition not that far away from them. So I don't know, but I think WWE suffered the worst as far as ratings were concerned because of the pandemic. Their ratings dropped, whereas AEW's dropped for a little bit and then actually got higher at some points during last year, even with the pandemic. Which is very unusual. Because you would consider that AEW, if the ratings for WWE went down significantly, which they did because they dropped under 2 million, that AEW's, especially competing against NXT, their ratings would have been down, but they're not. They're up a lot. Speaking of AEW, they also will be having more fans back in attendance. Now, they've been having fans in attendance at Daly's Place, Revolution pay-per-view. They had more fans in attendance. The Blood and Guts match, I think they said they had about 1,000 people or whatever. But now officially, Daly's Place will be available pretty much full capacity for the Double or Nothing pay-per-view coming up pretty soon, which I'm excited about because AEW pay-per-views are always a lot of fun. They're like NXT pay-per-views, but different, where they're so infrequent that when they do come around, it actually it feels special and it's a lot of fun instead of it's just a routine thing. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's going on. I'm not too wild about the world title match, but the rest of the card I'm pretty much into. But that's not the only news coming out of AEW. The big news coming out of AEW, despite the fact that I have seen in Twitter and debated on Twitter with people like, yeah, what happened to the TV deal? No, that's not happening. Oh, God. Oh my gosh, I just love it when people say that stuff. So I just go, I'm going to save this tweet and I'm going to look back on it in a while, in a couple months, and see how well this tweet ages. And they don't age well. The executives at Warner Media are now moving AEW Dynamite from TNT and moving it to the flagship station of Time Warner, which is TBS, which is the same station that the 605 old World Championship Wrestling show was on. So they have moved from the sister channel to the main channel for Warner Media, and that's where Dynamite will air. So, it exposes them again to a larger audience, and exposes them to a lot more promotional abilities, a lot more cross promotion stuff. I'm not so sure what that means for the Wednesday during the NBA season, if they're going to be preempted again for some of those Final Four shows or not. I'm not familiar with TBS's schedule anymore. I'm sure there is some preemption. What I remember from the old days is that sometimes the old NWA and WCW Saturday night shows would get preempted for like Braves baseball. I remember that vividly as a kid and tuning in at 605 and seeing baseball and like, what the hell is this? Where's my wrestling? And so I remember that big time. But TBS has obviously changed in the last 30 years, so we'll see what the news schedule is for Dynamite. But that's not it. In addition to that, they are also going to have a show, and I think this is still on TNT, but it's going to be Rampage, AEW Rampage, which will be happening on Friday nights. Yes, I said Friday nights, the same night as Smackdown, but they're not going up head-to-head against Smackdown, apparently. They're airing this show at 10 p.m. So Smackdown's going to be from 8 to 10, and then you're going to have an AEW Rampage show from 10 to 11. Now, I remember Cody saying that this show was going to be different than Dynamite. It was going to not be like just Dynamite extra hours. So what the format for Rampage is, I can't wait to see what they're going to do with that. But AEW is not stopping. They're going forward with a lot of this stuff, and that's still not the end of the news from AEW. They're also getting 4 specials 4 primetime specials that they're running on TBS or TNT. I think it's TBS or TNT, one of the networks. It doesn't really matter. Here's the interesting thing about that, because a lot of younger fans might go, well, why is that a big deal? That is a huge deal. You know why it's a huge deal? Forget what WWE calls that pay-per-view now. The original Clash of the Champions from the Crockett territory, the old NWA, the old WCW before the Crockett's fell. 1988, in March, Clash of the Champions went head-to-head against WrestleMania 4. And for several years after that, all the way into the Monday Night War era, the Clash of the Champions was this unique event. The wrestling landscape was different back then. You had weekly TV shows, mostly syndicated, and the Crockett had TBS. Vince had the USA Network, and Vince also had an association with NBC. So while they had their weekly programs and their pay-per-views, they also had, both companies also had these one-off special primetime events. Now, for the WWF, it was always Saturday night's main event. Saturday night's main event would be on NBC. It was always a big deal. On the Crockett side, and WCW, NWA, JCP side, they had Clash of the Champions, which were basically, almost pay-per-view worthy cards. Some of the Clash of Champions are some of the best wrestling cards of that decade and the early 90s. And there's so many memories. I can't wait to get back to the retro reviews, and when I finally get to the Clash of Champions, because there's so many great ones that I remember as a kid. I recorded every single one of them when I was a kid. The VCR, I had stacks of VCRs of almost every single Clash of the Champions. I love those shows. So that's what it sounds like here, because they're not going to call it Clash of the Champions, but yes, Tony Khan is very much a fan of old school wrestling, and apparently the executives at TBS like to see somebody there has done research into the heritage of wrestling on those networks, and like, oh yeah, didn't we used to do those Clash of the Champion things that drew millions of viewers? Why don't we try to do that again? So I think that's what they're going to do. And I like that idea, because right now AEW is kind of doing that with some of these bigger dynamites that they have. But I think what's going to wind up happening is you're going to get the 4 pay-per-views, and then alternating around those pay-per-views, you're going to have the 4 big special network specials. So they're moving up to somewhat to 8 big shows a year. And a lot of people may think it's too much or whatever, but I think it's appropriate, because one of the complaints a lot of people have had, and I've noticed this too, is that there's a lot of people on Dynamite. They have way more wrestlers than they have time for the 2-hour show. Even with Dark Elevation on YouTube, there are way too many wrestlers on AEW's roster for them to be on Dynamite. And there are a lot of factions. Well, how do you cure that? How do you fix that? You have a second show. You add 4 more big events to the year. That's how you do it. So now some people who may not be getting time or storylines that we think they should be getting might be getting more time and more storylines. The more time they have, the more that AEW is going from being a startup. I think they've kind of done that at this point. They're going from being a startup to being a serious major league wrestling company. They've been a major league company in my opinion, but I think with the additional shows and the new structure that they're getting, the probably bump in money they're going to get from being on TBS as opposed to TNT, everybody who's been poo-pooing, and there's still people who are going to continue to poo-poo AEW, but dude, they've done it. They did it a long time ago. The only people who are shunning AEW now is like it's nothing significant, are people who just are in denial, and that's pretty much where it is. I am happy, because as you guys know, I'm an old school wrestling fan, and anything that resembles the kind of wrestling format that I remember as a kid, I got war games with blood and guts. I'm getting championship matches on TV. I'm getting champions weekly defending their TV championships on television. I'm getting some stories that are pretty damn good. Some aren't. There are some stuff in AEW that they kind of botch on a little bit. And I'm getting factions. I'm getting everything. I'm getting the legitimate, real Clash of the Champions format back. Not as the name of a pay-per-view, but the actual Clash of the Champions. The only thing that I'm hoping that they do is that they do a Halloween show, because I think that's all that's missing. If they do, is for AEW to either do a Halloween show or a Thanksgiving show, because those were synonymous with Crockett back in the day too. And for that topic, a lot of conventional wisdom today, and it has been for about 10 to 15, 20 years now, is that they stopped doing those holiday shows because less people would watch. I think things might have changed now because of streaming services again. I think if you had a Halloween night wrestling show, if you had a Thanksgiving night wrestling show, even if, now they're not going to do I know AEW's not going to do a Christmas show. That was one of the big things he talked about. They may not do those shows, but I think if you air them on those nights, I think it'd be a good thing. There is something, especially if you talk to old Crockett fans like myself, even though I wasn't in the Greensboro area, I remember Starrcade 86 and 87 being on Thanksgiving night and being very excited about it's Thanksgiving, and then after Thanksgiving's over, I can watch this really cool wrestling show. So, I mean, that would be cool. I don't think they're going to do that again because I think that's, those guys are very big on spending those holidays with their family. But I would like to see a Halloween themed show. I would like to see a kind of a Starrcade-esque kind of show for AEW. And I think AEW, now with all these new shows, I think it's even more imperative for them to do something that I think they haven't done yet, is to designate one show as their big season finale, as their big Super Bowl, as their big Wrestle Kingdom, as their big WrestleMania. Kind of a lot of us think it's either Double or Nothing or All In or All Out, because All Out is the inherited child of the original All In show that started all this. And but Double or Nothing is their first ever real legitimate pay-per-view as AEW. So it's kind of between those two events. I think they should probably establish one as being the flagship event, and hopefully they'll get to that sooner than later. For the old NWA, it was Starrcade. Same thing with WCW. Obviously, WWE is WrestleMania. TNA, I think TNA is Slammiversary. I'm not sure. I think it's Slammiversary or Bound for. I think it's Slammiversary. And TNA fans will correct me on that. Again, I told you guys I've never watched a lot of TNA. And obviously for New Japan, it's Wrestle Kingdom or the January 4th show. So hopefully AEW gets to something like that on their schedule. But lots of big news coming up for wrestling in North America. And of course, I'd be remiss to forget to say that AEW is going back on tour relatively soon. They're going to start in Miami and they're going to be touring arenas again. So I guess we're almost back, guys. It's almost back to where it used to be. And now the thing I'm going to be most curious about seeing is after this pandemic, after this year and a half of things being shut down in the wrestling world and everybody having to get innovative and do all kinds of crazy stuff. Thank God the Thunderdome's going away, by the way. I always hated that thing. I know a lot of people liked it. I thought it was terrible. But because they told people how to cheer, and it's so fake and WWE is fake and artificial enough as it is. To add fake artificial fans, it was just too much for me. But now we're going to have real fans back, and I'm going to be curious to see what the attendances are like, and how long they can keep these attendance figures. Because for the first couple months, as both companies go around the country, there's going to be a lot of people itching to go to a wrestling show, or itching to go to any kind of an event like that. But after a couple months, we're going to see how the crowds hold up. Because both AEW and WWE were not, they weren't packing arenas every single week. Let's not kid ourselves about this. AEW had, half full arenas. WWE had half full arenas. Every once in a while, in a blue moon, they'd sell out a place. But by and large, both companies were not selling out arenas every single week. So we'll see how long. I predict that there will be a big, string of sold out Dynamites and Raws and Smackdowns and stuff. But I don't know how well that's going to be. And it's going to be interesting to see how the wrestlers adapt to this, going back out on the road again, traveling the country again. A lot of them haven't done this for a year and a half. A lot of people in AEW, because AEW's adopted a lot of wrestlers over the last. They've hired a lot of wrestlers and staff over the last year and a half. A lot of those people were not in AEW when AEW was touring before. So the logistics behind that are going to be very interesting, and seeing how some of the wrestlers react to that stuff. It should be fun. It should be fun stuff. I would like to see, somebody do a Being the Elite the way Being the Elite originally was before it was an actual YouTube show, but back when it was like a video vlog. Back when it was a vlog about being a wrestler on the road. Back then, it was the Bucks and Omega, and what it was like being wrestlers like themselves, the international circuit, traveling to Japan, traveling to Mexico, doing all the indie dates in the States, being part of Ring of Honor and New Japan and all that stuff. I would like to see what that looks like now. That would be fun if somebody did. Somebody probably already is doing one. I'm just not aware of it. So that's the big wrestling news this week. Gaming. As some of you know, I have started up my playthrough of Mass Effect Legendary Edition. I've been talking about it for a long time now. We finally got to it last week. I am absolutely enjoying the show. The few of you guys who are out there every single time on the live chat, I absolutely appreciate you guys. There's going to be a big special surprise for anybody who's on it tonight, Wednesday, when I start up at 6 p.m. And I'm going to try to go right before Dynamite starts. But yeah, it's going to be a fun time completing this series. I'm about, the way I've timed it, 30 hours per game, 2 hours every session, 5 sessions a week. So it's about 3 weeks to get through each game. And I think it's more fun that way because it's not just overload. Because nobody's going to sit and watch me play a game for 10 hours straight. But you may peek at a video here or a video there, or fast forward to, a part if you've played the game before and you want to see how I react to when, we go to Vermeer, or how we react to when, the first confrontation with Saren, or how I react when I do some of the DLC material. I think that stuff's going to be pretty cool. And I'm trying to label the videos specifically to the tasks or in the parts of the game that I'm doing, so you can look at the stuff that you're interested in. Because again, I don't expect anybody to sit and watch me play video games for 30 hours straight. So that's been a lot of fun, and I'm hoping that has grown a little bit on the channel. I'm hoping to grow it a little bit more. Same thing with the other entertainment stuff. I will be continuing with the Death Note reaction videos this week. Been really slowed on that. There's a lot of stuff I decided to plan on doing. I am also right now recording other things for the future. The last season of The Walking Dead, as you guys know, I'm a Walking Dead fan. That starts up in August, and I have been recording my retro reviews for the first 10 seasons, one video per season of The Walking Dead. That will start airing 10 weeks before the final season starts, so there'll be like one every single week, which should be a lot of fun. Just put up a review of the new Netflix film that's number 1 right now, The Woman in the Mirror, The Woman in the Window. I'm not going to get into that movie anymore. I mean, it's not a terrible movie, but the review's up on YouTube. You guys can check it out there. One thing that I do think, and I'm going to talk now a little bit about geek culture and TVs and TV shows. I saw a trailer for the new Black Widow movie, and I saw some people on some of my the fellow YouTubers, as now I've re-entered, I should say, the movie space, because I had offensive movie reviews as a YouTube channel before. This Thunderbolt Ross thing. So I don't. Is it a rib? Somebody fill me in on this. Is this a rib that all of these comic book? I hate using this term, but it's the most accurate term to describe them until I think of another one. All of these comic book nerds who are on YouTube, and nerd's not a bad thing. Nerd's it means you're smart. But nerd's probably the wrong word. It's probably more sweaty. I like sweaties a little bit better. Some of these comic book sweaties who just go overboard with stuff and try to push narratives. And if you know me and you see some of my reviews of some stuff, I don't like that. Because when you push a narrative, like Snoke means something, like Doctor Strange he's going to be in here, and you do video after video after video talking about stuff, and then it doesn't happen in the show, the fans who watch that stuff start watching those shows with that stuff in the back of their mind, and then when it doesn't happen, they're a little bit disappointed. And the new thing is now with this Thunderbolt Ross stuff, there are a couple YouTubers in particular who are just pushing this crap every single week, and I'm like, first off, nobody gives a rat's ass about Thunderbolt Ross. It's not like I want to go watch a Marvel movie because I'm really looking forward to seeing Iron Man and Hawkeye. Well, maybe not Hawkeye. Well, actually, no. Hawkeye probably more than Thunderbolt Ross. But I'm looking forward to seeing Iron Man and Thor and Black Panther. And, I can't wait to see what they do with the Eternals. And we've got this new, this other new show coming up in WandaVision and blah, 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 blah. And I'm really looking forward to what Thunderbolt Ross is doing in it. I don't know what's wrong with these people. Nobody cares about. They're the. Well, I shouldn't say nobody. They care about Thunderbolt Ross, but they are pushing a narrative that is not there. They're pushing a narrative that's based off of them knowing that there's a show called Thunderbolts that will eventually be on Disney Plus. So they're trying to look for where Disney is going to have some cameo or reference to it, and they're trying to get ahead of it so they can go, "Hey, look, I called it." A broken clock is right twice a day. That doesn't mean that you're smart or clever or called anything. I say this all the time with my wrestling prediction videos. I don't even do wrestling prediction videos often, but I always say, hey, this is what I see, but it might not happen this way. It could be this way. That it'd be cool if they did this, but they might do something else. I really am very aware of the fact that there are a couple thousand people who do listen to me talk about this stuff, and I don't ever want to go and get people to start going, oh, maybe this is going to happen, and then watching something, expecting something to happen that doesn't happen. Because first off, it makes me look stupid. And second off, it disappoints you from the show that you were watching, that you're not enjoying it as much because for some reason, this thing that I made up in my head because I read some article or read a comic book or read the original novel that the movie or TV show is based off of didn't happen in the show. So I'm very, like I said, I'm very aware of that, and I'm very aware when other people do it, and I don't like it because I think it's one of the many things that I think is wrong with social media. As great as social media is, I think one of the things that's wrong with it is that you get these people jumping on these bandwagons. They're not even really bandwagons. They jump on this kind of prophecy, not prophesizing. That's a good way for it. That's a good way to say it. They jump is trying to be prophets. They try to be prophets of entertainment. And I've always said, as a writer, that's ridiculous. You're trying to predict someone else's fiction. It just doesn't make any. That could change at the last minute. That's why it's just stupid. I don't know. But the Thunderbolt Ross thing again. Somebody let me know. Is this a rib? Is there really an issue with Thunderbolt Ross? Is Thunderbolt Ross really that significant to the Marvel Cinematic Universe that there are multiple videos about this motherfucker online? Let me know. Let your voice be heard on Twitter, Facebook, social media, on my social media channels, and let me know about it. But yeah, it's pretty crazy, man. But that's really it for this week. Again, there's mostly the big thing for this week is the return of wrestling fans and the fact that AEW is really, really going into full gear, pun intended. Now that the pandemic is ending, they're moving forward with a lot of their plans. And I think the Wednesday Night War was a skirmish, but I think the bigger war might be ahead of us. I'm not sure, but this might get good. This might become a lot more competitive. And it's going to be competitive in a different way. It's not going to be head-to-head TV shows. It's going to be this kind of it's going to be how big is AEW going to grow? I think that's the big thing about this. How big is AEW going to grow? Is AEW going to be able to create an ecosystem that is separate from what WWE does, that is different from what WWE does, slightly similar but different, that people can go to? Because if this continues with what AEW is doing, to go back to that, the wrestling industry as a whole is going to be a lot better place. And guys and girls are going to be able to not have to worry so much. And I think at the end of the day, as much as I always say, don't worry about, you shouldn't watch AEW hoping that the existence of AEW makes WWE a better show, because you're just worried about WWE. You don't really care about wrestling. The unintended consequence of all this could be if AEW over the next 2 years becomes its own functioning ecosystem that's just, that's getting about 1.5 million viewers or whatever, and they're doing all this, and they're getting all this ad revenue money and these TV deals. It then makes WWE, it then makes a lot of wrestlers go, well, I don't really have to be in WWE. If I'm not happy here, I can go somewhere else. Boy, they just started a new show, and they got another 16 hours of content added to their contract with TBS and TNT. Well, maybe there's some spot for me there, especially the women wrestlers. So that's something to consider as we go forward with the wonderful world of pro wrestling and sports entertainment. But that's it for this week. I will see you guys next week for more news, rumors, and conversation here on the Rantin Review podcast. Thank you guys for listening, and behave yourselves out there, but not too much.